Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight, we're not just drifting into history, we're stepping softly into the forbidden glow of sinful nights in ancient Rome and Greece, where oil lamps flickered over quiet desires, where laughter mixed with secrets behind stone walls, and where the most human parts of us, longing, curiosity, loneliness, whispered through the streets long after the world fell asleep. Tonight, you and I will wander through silent alleyways of Pompeii, slip past the closed doors of Roman taverns, and breathe in the warm, moonlit air of Greek symposiums, all in the gentlest way, crafted for deep rest, soft reflection, and the kind of sleep that arrives like a tide returning home. These are not stories of shock, but stories of human hearts living, wanting, and reaching out across thousands of years. Stories that remind us that ancient nights were not so different from our own. So before you get comfortable, take a gentle moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if these deep sleep history stories help you find peace, sleep better, or simply reflect on our shared journey through time. Now, close your eyes, let your breath slow, and allow the ancient night to open its doors for you.
Tonight, you are walking through a city that no longer exists on any map. A place woven from memory, dust, and the gentle hush of forgotten nights. The stones beneath your feet are warm, even though the sun has long slipped behind the roofs of ancient Rome and the temples of old Greece. The air carries a soft heaviness, the faint sweetness of wine spilled earlier in the evening, the earthy scent of olive wood burning in distant lamps, and the quiet murmur of streets returning to stillness. You take a slow breath, feeling the night settle around you like a cloak, cool along the edges, yet humming with stories that survived only because the darkness once protected them. As you walk, your footsteps echo lightly, not loudly enough to disturb anything, only enough to remind you that you are here, visiting, observing, drifting beside the shadows of people who lived long before your own dreams were ever imagined. Above you, the oil lamps flicker behind iron grills, their flames quivering with the breeze as if whispering to you, "Come closer, there are things the daylight never tells." And so you do. Another breath in and out. Let the pace of the night slow your heartbeat. Let the sounds soften, becoming distant waves instead of sharp ripples. Because tonight we are not rushing through history. We are not judging it. We are simply walking beside it, gently, slowly, as if each step uncovers a memory sleeping just beneath the dust. The street turns narrower, its walls rising like old companions, leaning in to protect you from the restless world outside. In Rome, these alleys once carried laughter, secrets, and choices whispered only after the city had grown tired. In Athens, they carried music, hurried footsteps, and the sighs of those searching for something their daylight lives could never give. Yet right now, everything is quiet, completely quiet, the kind of quiet where your own thoughts seem to soften. You pause beneath a balcony draped with weathered cloth, its folds shifting with the breeze like the breath of someone sleeping above. Perhaps you imagine the faint clinking of cups, the distant hum of voices finishing a late meal, echoes, nothing more. Glimmers from a world that once existed here. As you stand still, listening, the city seems to breathe with you. Inhale, exhale, matching your rhythm, welcoming you into the softest parts of its past. Tonight's journey will wander through places often called sinful, streets of indulgence, taverns of pleasure, corners where restraint slipped away as easily as silk through the hands of a dancer. But here, in this storytelling night, nothing is harsh, nothing is crude. We enter these worlds the way a historian brushes dust from an ancient inscription, with respect, curiosity, and a gentleness that honors what remains. You are safe here. You can let yourself drift. The stories of these nights, Roman, Greek, whispered, half-remembered, will come to you slowly like tides returning to shore. You don't need to seek them. You don't need to chase them. Just breathe. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw soften. Let this city, this dream of Rome and Greece blended into one soft twilight, guide you deeper into the kind of night only history remembers. Soon we will wander past the taverns where lamps burned until dawn, the porticos where whispered confessions drifted into the dark, the hidden doorways where desire, curiosity, and loneliness once intertwined. But not yet. For now, just walk. Listen. Feel how the night wraps around you. Because every ancient story begins not with noise, but with a quiet step into a world that trusted the dark to hold its secrets.
As you continue walking, the soft rhythm of the night begins to settle into your bones, as if the city itself is guiding your steps toward a quieter truth. The moon hangs low above the rooftops, round, pale, and slightly blurred by the thin veil of incense drifting from a nearby courtyard. Somewhere behind a marble wall, someone has lit a small offering flame, and its scent mixes with the night air like a memory you cannot fully grasp. You pause near a fountain carved long before your lifetime, its water trickling gently over the worn stone. The sound is so soft, so steady, that it feels like the night's own heartbeat. In ancient Rome, fountains like this were places where people shared whispers they dared not say aloud elsewhere. In Greece, they were places where poets paused, letting the world fall silent long enough for inspiration to arrive. You step closer, letting the echo of water fold into your breathing, slowly in, slowly out, letting each breath carry away the leftover noise of your day until only the quiet pulse of history remains. A faint breeze brushes your cheek, carrying with it the distant laughter of a group wandering home, the kind of laughter softened by wine, tired feet, and the relief of night's anonymity. It fades quickly, as if the wind itself decides you deserve this stillness uninterrupted. Ahead, the pathway widens into a small square. Nothing grand, nothing monumental, but the kind of modest space where life once unfolded in ways that never made it into the history books. You can almost sense the presence of people who once gathered here, a baker
wiping flour from his hands after closing his shop, a musician resting beside a column after playing long into the evening, a young couple quietly holding hands where the shadows meet the lamplight. Their lives were simple, perhaps ordinary, but in moments like this, beneath the hush of the night, they felt the same longing, the same curiosity, the same quiet desire to step beyond the expectations of daylight. Tonight, we are not here to judge their choices. We are here to understand them gently. You move through the square, feeling the stones shift subtly under your feet, smoothing your path as if welcoming you into stories the world has forgotten. A cat slips across the far edge of the courtyard, its silhouette gliding like a brushstroke of ink against the soft glow of the lamps. It pauses, watching you with slow blinking eyes, then disappears into an archway, an invitation of sorts, a reminder that even the smallest creatures once wandered freely through the same ancient nights. As you follow the path out of the square, you begin to notice the faint traces of music, so faint that you're not entirely sure whether it is memory or imagination. A lyre's plucked strings, a flute's breathy hum, perhaps the echo of dancers whose feet once kissed these stones in patterns now long forgotten. Music in the ancient world lived in the night. It breathed differently after sunset, smoother, slower, more willing to reveal the emotions people hid during the day. And as you listen, even if the notes are only in your mind, something within you softens. You walk deeper into a narrow street lined with shuttered windows and closed doors, each hiding stories of lives lived in private shades of longing. These were the streets where sin was nothing more than a word created by those who feared what they didn't understand. But for the people who lived here, Romans, Greeks, wanderers, lovers, night was simply the one place where they could let themselves be human without consequence. And perhaps that is why you feel so at ease now. Because standing here, surrounded by the remnants of their forgotten freedoms, you realize that all people across all ages have carried the same quiet yearning to feel something real when the world grows quiet. So take another slow breath. Feel your body loosen, feel your thoughts drift, and let this ancient night cradle you with the softness it once offered to thousands before you. You are not intruding, you are simply passing through a memory that welcomes gentle hearts.
The night deepens as you continue your quiet wandering, and with every step, the city around you seems to melt a little more into something dreamlike, half memory, half imagination, entirely peaceful. The lamps grow sparser here, their glow dimming into small halos that barely reach the ground, leaving most of the street in a soft, embracing darkness. Yet you do not feel lost. If anything, the darkness feels like a guide, nudging you gently toward corners where stories linger, like the last warmth of a hand recently released. As you walk, you notice how the sounds change. The distant murmur of a tavern grows softer behind you, while a gentler hush rises ahead. It is the hush of a district where the nights once stretched long, where pleasure and loneliness braided themselves into something fragile and human, where people came not only to indulge, but to forget, to feel, to breathe without judgment. You pause near a doorway partially hidden by a faded curtain. Its fabric moves faintly with the breeze, though no one seems to be inside now. Centuries ago, lamps would have flickered behind that curtain, casting warm shapes on the walls, shapes of hands brushing against hands, of laughter muted by desire, of souls meeting for a moment before drifting apart again. You let the fabric sway and continue walking, careful not to disturb the quiet that has settled so completely around you. Ahead, a colonnade opens like a long, gentle exhale. Tall columns stretch upward, their shadows towering across the ground like ancient sentinels, keeping watch over everything the night wishes to hide. You walk between them, feeling the cool air shift as though the past brushes lightly against your shoulders. Here, in these sheltered spaces, philosophers once debated virtue while their students slipped away into the very districts they preached against. Priests offered prayers under the same roofs where lovers met in secret. Life in ancient times was never as clean or as orderly as stories make it seem. There was always contradiction, always a meeting point between what people said they believed and what they quietly allowed themselves to feel. As you walk deeper into the colonnade, your footsteps echo softly, stretching into the kind of rhythm that makes time feel slower, more patient. You breathe in, letting your lungs fill with the cool night air, and breathe out, letting your thoughts loosen, floating like dust in moonlight. Somewhere far away, a lone flute begins to play. Not lively, not sorrowful, simply drifting, as if someone is practicing a melody meant only for themselves. The sound is faint but steady, weaving through the columns, wrapping around you like a ribbon. You follow the sound without hurry, letting it guide you into a narrow lane that curves gently to the right. The stones here are smoother, more worn as though thousands of feet once passed through, seeking the same quiet you seek now. This neighborhood, centuries ago, was alive with contradictions. Temples close to wine houses, libraries next to gardens where lovers met, schools beside bathhouses where the steam hid both confessions and comfort. People came here for reasons as varied as their hearts: curiosity, longing, rebellion, or simply the need to be seen without the mask daylight demanded. But tonight, these streets hold only you. The past steps back, giving you space. You walk as though floating, the night carrying you effortlessly. And when the lane finally opens into a small terrace overlooking the dark outline of the city, you stop. The view stretches out beneath you, rooftops, chimneys, distant lamps trembling in the wind, all blending into a slow, ancient heartbeat. You rest your hands against the cool stone railing and inhale once more, letting the deep quiet sink into you. Tonight, you are not a visitor. You are part of this night, part of its silence, part of its breath. The sinful nights of Rome and Greece were never truly about sin. They were about being human in a world that often asked too much. And now, in this soft, unguarded moment, you understand them a little more. Let the night hold you, let history cradle you, and allow yourself to drift, weightless in the warmth of a world long gone but never forgotten. When the sun finally begins its slow descent over Rome, the city seems to release a long, invisible sigh, as if shedding the weight of everything it has carried since morning.
The last rays stretch across the rooftops, washing the marble temples in gold that fades almost as soon as you notice it, leaving behind a pale glow like the memory of daylight. You stand at the edge of the Forum, and even here, even at the center of the empire, the shift is unmistakable. During the day, Rome is loud with ambition, senators raising their voices in polished speeches, merchants calling out prices over the hum of crowded marketplaces, the clang of hammers from the smithy blending with the rhythm of horses pulling carts across stone roads polished by countless years. In the daylight, everything feels sharp, restless, hungry to be witnessed. But as the sun slips lower, the edges soften, the noise thins. Shadows stretch across the ground like slow-moving curtains, and Rome begins its quiet transformation into something gentler, something older, something truer. By the time the sky turns the color of watered wine, the first lamps are already flickering to life, small glowing seeds of the night. One by one, they appear along the streets, in windows, under arches, illuminating the beginning of a world hidden entirely from the authority of daylight. You take a slow breath, and the air has changed too. Gone is the dust of the chariots and the metallic tang of the arena. Now the night carries different scents. Warm bread cooling behind tavern doors, sweet resin from burning pine wood, a trace of wine-soaked grapes from amphorae freshly opened for the evening crowd. Somewhere nearby, someone is roasting chestnuts, and the smell drifts upward with a comforting warmth, settling into the atmosphere like a gentle reminder that even in ancient cities, small pleasures were always the first to awaken after sunset. The sounds shift with the scents. Instead of the booming roar of the Colosseum or the blunt chorus of men arguing in the baths, you hear softer noises. Cups clinking in taverns, murmured laughter from doorways half hidden by fabric curtains, sandals brushing lightly across the stones as workers, exhausted from long hours under the sun, wander toward the places where the night promises a different kind of relief. Rome in the daytime belongs to power. Rome at night belongs to the tired, the lonely, the hopeful, and the hearts carrying stories too fragile for daylight. As you walk through a shaded alley, you begin to sense that transformation in your own steps. There is no rush here, no audience, only the dim glow of lamps reflecting in puddles left by the last water carriers, and the soft hum of a city exhaling into its second life. You take a slow breath, and you pause near a small tavern where the door is slightly open. Inside, the light is warm, low, and golden, the kind that seems to wrap itself around every surface. You catch the faint rhythm of music, just a lyre being plucked by someone who isn't trying to impress anyone. Someone simply letting the melody spill out like water finding its natural course. This music, drifting into the alley, feels like the true voice of Rome after dark, unguarded, unpolished, honest. As you continue walking, you begin to understand something simple and deeply human, something the surviving ruins could never tell you. The people of ancient Rome were not always the grand figures carved on statues or recorded in history books. They were people who got tired, people who longed for warmth, people who needed, more than anything, a place to forget the weight of their day. And that is why Rome had two cities, one of stone and sunlight, and the other of shadows and whispered comfort. Tonight, you walk into the second one. As you drift deeper into Rome's nighttime heart, you begin to sense how completely the city has let go of its daytime persona, as though the sun had peeled away an outer layer, revealing a quieter, more vulnerable soul underneath. The streets that felt rigid and disciplined under daylight now seem to loosen, curving gently like the relaxed posture of someone who finally gets to set aside their mask. You walk past the shadow of the Colosseum, no longer roaring with crowds, no longer trembling with excitement or fear. In the fading twilight, its arches look almost tired, as if relieved to rest after hours of demanding spectacle. The silence wrapped around it feels almost sacred, reminding you that even monuments grow weary when the world expects too much from them. When you turn into a smaller street, the atmosphere shifts again. The stones beneath your feet are warm from the day, releasing their stored heat like a slow exhale. And the air smells different here, less of incense, more of humanity. The aroma of stews simmering behind tavern walls mingles with the scent of cheap wine spilled onto wooden tables. You hear the faint clatter of dice, the scrape of stools being dragged closer, the soft rustle of someone leaning in to share a secret too fragile for daylight. Inside these places, men who wore stern expressions under the sun now laugh with unguarded mouths. Women who spent the day negotiating, bargaining, or tending to children now sit with their shoulders relaxed, their hands wrapped around warm cups. Young people, apprentices, laborers, messengers gather in corners, rubbing the soreness from their palms, while telling each other stories about dreams they cannot yet afford. No one here is trying to look important. No one is trying to impress the Senate, the gods, or the ghosts of their ancestors. For a few hours each night, everyone is allowed to simply exist without pretense. You keep walking, and soon you find yourself near a row of small inns. Their doors are framed with dim lanterns glowing like half-asleep eyes. These inns are not luxurious. They are cramped, smoky, sometimes noisy, yet they hold their own kind of comfort, the comfort of bodies tired from long work, of travelers finding a bed after many miles, of strangers gathering in hallways lit by wavering flames. From one open window, you hear the steady rhythm of someone tuning a lyre, the soft pluck of strings adjusting themselves into harmony. From another window drifts the low hum of a song without performance, without audience, sung simply because the night invites honesty more than the day ever could. As you move away from the inns, the crowds thin until only a few wanderers remain. You watch a man sitting alone on a doorstep, elbows resting on his knees, staring into the middle distance with eyes that look too tired for his age. Perhaps he is thinking about the market stall he must return to tomorrow. Or perhaps he is thinking about someone far away, someone he misses more strongly when the world grows quiet. Nearby, a woman leans against a wall, listening to the night as though waiting for an answer to a question she's carried for years. These small scenes, the quiet ache, the soft longing, the desire to let the weight slip off one's shoulders, are the true pulse of ancient Rome after sunset. The empire may have been built on power, but its nights belonged to the people who had none, who sought comfort not in triumphs, but in forgetting for a moment how demanding life could be. As you walk past them, you feel something inside you settle. you begin to understand that the loneliness of ancient people was not so different from the loneliness of modern hearts. The night reveals that across thousands of years, humans have always shared the same fragile truth, that after a long day of being strong, they all looked for a place where they could finally allow themselves to feel tired. Tonight, Rome quietly makes room for you to feel that too.
As the night grows older, Rome begins to reveal the parts of itself that daylight never had the patience to understand. You walk along a stretch of road where the lamps burn lower, their flames shrinking into small amber embers, as though conserving their glow for only those willing to travel quietly. The city feels softer here, slower, almost shy. And for the first time tonight, you sense how deeply the people of ancient Rome must have felt this same shift. The moment when the weight of daylight pride slipped off their shoulders, leaving behind only the truth of being human. You pass a narrow corridor between two buildings, where a solitary figure leans against the wall, their face half hidden by the glow of a lamp. They are neither drunk nor troubled, only lost in thought, the kind of thought that comes only when night has silenced the world enough to make room for it. Perhaps they are replaying the words they wished they had said, or remembering the voice of someone they can no longer reach. Or maybe they simply needed a moment of emptiness, a pause, before returning to a life that demands too much. You continue walking, and a gentle breeze brushes past, carrying with it the faint sound of waves from the Tiber. The river at night is its own city, slow, heavy, and contemplative. Boats creak softly against their moorings, and the water reflects the lanterns along the banks like threads of molten bronze. You stop at the edge of the river, letting its quiet carry you. Rome's daytime river is bustling, filled with merchants and cargo and shouts thrown across decks. But at night, the Tiber becomes a vast mirror for the sky, still, listening, a companion for wandering souls who no longer know what they are searching for. As you stand there, you notice a couple seated on the steps leading down to the river. They aren't speaking, only leaning against each other with the tired familiarity of people who have shared many years. They don't need words. The simple weight of another human being beside them is enough to steady the heart. Not far away, a young man sits alone, tracing patterns on the ground with the tip of a broken reed. He looks as though he came here to forget a failure, a loss, a disappointment too fresh to speak aloud. But even in his loneliness, he is not alone. This river has held thousands like him. And tonight, without a single word, it holds him too. When you finally leave the riverside and wander deeper into the quieter streets, you begin to understand why Rome needed its nights so desperately. The empire may have stretched across continents, demanding strength and discipline from its people, but no heart can withstand endless grandeur. Every soul, even the proudest, even the strongest, needs a place where it can rest without being seen as weak. You walk past a bakery closing for the night. The baker, flour still on his sleeves, gently sweeps the threshold before locking the door. His movements are slow, almost tender, as though this simple act helps close the day behind him. A few steps further, an elderly woman waters a small pot of herbs outside her window. The lamp beside her glows just bright enough to show the lines on her face. Lines carved not by battles or statues or epic tales, but by quiet years of living, hoping, surviving. These are Rome's real stories,
Not the victories carved in marble, not the orations preserved in scrolls, but these soft, ordinary moments, the quiet ache of people who carried more than they could show, and the small rituals that kept them human. As you walk, you inhale slowly, letting the coolness settle your thoughts, and exhale, letting your shoulders drop the way the city drops its armor each night. Rome's second life, the life of shadows, lamps, and tired hearts, is not a place of sin. It is a place of exhale, of release, of the deep emotional honesty that only appears when the sun has gone. And now, walking through its nearly silent streets, you realize that for the people of ancient Rome, night was not an escape. It was the only time they could finally return to themselves. Tonight, it allows you to return to yourself too.
As you continue your wandering through the soft dark of ancient streets, the night gently shifts, guiding you toward a part of Roman life whispered about more than spoken, the Lupanar, Pompeii's house of pleasure. The word itself comes from lupa, she-wolf, a name layered with stories, judgments, and misunderstandings, none of which truly capture the quiet reality of what these places meant to the people who stepped through their doors. As you approach one such building in your imagination, you notice that nothing about it is grand. The doorway is low, almost humble, shaped by the careful hands of workers who lived thousands of years ago. Inside, the air is cool, carrying the faint scent of old stone and something like dried herbs. The corridor is narrow, and the lamps along the walls burn low, casting soft amber halos that sway gently with every shift of air, as though they too understand that this place must be held with tenderness. Small rooms line the hallway, bare, quiet, each with a stone bed built into the wall. Time has softened the edges of everything. The stone no longer feels cold but worn, smoothed by years of human stories settling into it like layers of dust. On the walls, the frescoes, once bright, playful, and bold, have faded into gentle outlines. The reds have turned to warm clay, the blues to misty gray. What once may have been scenes of instruction or invitation now read more like distant memories, blurred to protect their secrets. As you stand in the center of this space, you begin to sense how different the Lupanar feels from the gossip surrounding it. This is not a place of wildness or indulgence, not really. It is small, quiet, a shelter, a place for people who are tired, lonely, or simply seeking the brief comfort of being acknowledged by another human being. Tonight, imagine a man entering one of these rooms, not a wealthy senator or a powerful merchant, but someone ordinary, someone whose life never made it into history books. His shoulders are heavy, not with sin, but with exhaustion. He sits on the stone bed, running his hand across its surface, not minding the roughness. The walls feel close, but not suffocating, more like the embrace of a cave where he can finally let his guard fall. A woman enters the room a moment later. She is not painted with glamour, not shimmering like mythology would suggest. She is simply human, tired in her own way, carrying her own burdens, yet still offering a small, quiet smile. In this imagined night, there is no rush, no hunger, no dramatic seduction, Only two people who have spent the entire day pretending to be stronger than they truly feel. She sits near him, not touching at first. They breathe the same air. They listen to the distant hum of voices from the hallway. Slowly, gently, she asks a simple question, something like, "Are you all right?" And he exhales, really exhales for the first time all day. What passes between them is not the fevered passion painted in novels, nor the crude transaction described by historians lacking imagination. It is something softer, the warmth of being seen, the relief of letting someone else hold the weight for a moment, the quiet truth that even in ancient Rome, especially in ancient Rome, people longed for tenderness more than pleasure. The lamps flicker as if nodding to this truth. Outside, the night continues its slow breathing, wrapping the world in silence. Inside the Lupanar, nothing loud happens, only two tired souls sharing a corner of peace. And in that moment, you begin to understand why the frescoes faded, not because time destroyed them, but because memory chose to soften the edges, leaving only what mattered, the gentleness of human contact, dimly lit, unspoken, ancient as the city itself.
As you step deeper into the imagined Lupanar, the night outside seems to dissolve into a muffled hush, as though even the distant world understands the need for quiet here. The stone beneath your feet is warm in places and chilled in others, holding echoes of countless footsteps long gone. The faint light of the lamps trembles along the corridor, revealing more details the longer you allow your eyes to soften. The grain of ancient plaster, the uneven brushstrokes of murals fading into earth tones, the slight impression of fingertips left on the doorframe by someone who leaned there centuries before. You pause near another room. Inside, the bed is the same, stone, simple, softened by time, but the air feels different, carrying the faint scent of olive oil and crushed petals, perhaps the trace of someone who tried to make this place gentler for themselves or for a stranger they had yet to meet. The room is empty now, but tonight you imagine it as it once might have been. A woman sits cross-legged on the stone bed, adjusting the edge of a thin linen cloth draped over it. She smooths the fabric not because it will make the bed softer, but because it gives her hands something to do, something steady, something that belongs to her alone. She is waiting, but not with anticipation, more with a quiet acceptance, the way someone waits for the tide, knowing it will come whether or not they wish it to. Her hair is pinned loosely, strands falling over her cheek, and for a moment she closes her eyes, not to rest, but to gather herself. Outside the doorway, a man hesitates. He isn't young nor old, just one of the thousands whose lives were neither celebrated nor recorded. He stands there because life has worn him down, chipped at him the way water shapes stone, slowly, patiently, until he finds himself here, unsure of what he wants, but certain he needs something he cannot name. When he finally steps inside, the room seems to exhale. She lifts her gaze, not with performance, not with seduction, but with a softness that comes from recognizing tiredness in another person. He sits down,
the stone creaking quietly beneath him. There is no sudden spark, no dramatic moment, only two people sharing the same quiet. She asks him his name, not because she needs it for her work, but because names anchor people to the world. He answers, and saying it aloud seems to make him smaller, younger, like a child who finally admits he's been carrying something too heavy. She listens, truly listens, and that simple act feels like the rarest luxury in a city where noise and expectations never falter. After a long silence, he begins talking, not about desire, not about pleasure, but about the day he just survived. He speaks of the heat of the marketplace, the weight of crates he had to carry, the argument he overheard between merchants, the way the sun felt like it was draining the life from him 1 hour at a time. He doesn't realize he is talking this much until he hears himself, and then he stops, embarrassed. But she only nods, as if to say that exhaustion is not shameful here. She tells him small things too, not intimate things, not secrets, but pieces of her day. The cracked tile she nearly tripped on, the silly joke someone told that she pretended not to laugh at, the way the afternoon breeze felt like a gift after hours spent indoors. They talk like this gently, their voices barely above whispers, until talking no longer feels necessary. Then comes a softer quiet. Not the silence of strangers, but the silence of two people who have stopped pretending to be fine. In that shared stillness, he finally lets his shoulders drop. She places her hand, not boldly, not possessively, over his. Just enough contact to remind him that being human does not have to be endured alone. The lamp's flame sways, casting them in a warm, trembling glow, and for a fragile moment, time seems to hold its breath. No transaction, no judgment, no performance. Only tenderness allowed to exist in a place history mislabeled as sinful. And as you stand there watching this scene unfold in your mind, you realize that the Lupanar was never truly about bodies. It was about weary souls searching for a moment of gentleness in a world that rarely offered any.
As the imagined night inside the Lupanar stretches on, everything begins to soften. The air, the shadows, even the weight that the man and the woman brought with them when they entered the small stone room. The lamp on the wall burns lower now, its flame thinning into a steady glow that paints the space in warm amber, like a memory that knows it must be gentle or risk fading too soon. You stand in the doorway of your imagination, watching the scene unfold not as an intruder, but as someone quietly witnessing the truth behind lives long forgotten. The man sits with his back slightly curved, no longer holding himself upright the way daylight demands. His hands rest loosely in his lap, the tension slowly unwinding from his fingers. The woman sits beside him, not close enough to imply promise, but near enough to say, without words, "You don't have to be alone while you carry this." They don't speak for a long time. In the silence, the night becomes a third presence in the room, calm, patient, willing to cradle their exhaustion. Outside, distant voices drift like a soft current through the hallway,
reminders that others are sharing this same fragile search for peace. The stone walls, once cold and confining, now seem to hold warmth, absorbing the quiet vulnerability that fills the space. The man eventually inhales, a slow breath that trembles on its way in, as if brushing against something tender. He glances at the faded fresco on the wall, once bold, now muted into hues that resemble worn-out clay and the last blush of sunset. He doesn't look at it for meaning, only for grounding. Something about its imperfection, its blurred edges, its wounds from centuries of time mirrors the way he feels inside. Unfinished, weathered, but still standing. The woman follows his gaze and, without comment, simply lets her shoulder relax a little. For a moment, their breaths align so closely that they rise and fall as if carried by the same gentle tide. She shifts slightly and asks him, quietly, almost in a murmur, what he wishes he could forget tonight. The question isn't meant to pry. It is meant to give him permission. He hesitates, not because the answer is difficult, but because no one has asked him such a thing in years. When he finally speaks, it is not a confession of sin or desire. It is something far simpler, a memory of a mistake made earlier that day, a harsh word he regrets, a fear he carries about tomorrow. His voice catches only once and she notices, but she doesn't touch him. Not yet. She lets his words settle into the stillness, like dust falling gently through a shaft of light. Then, with a quiet breath, she whispers something small and soft, something like, "You're allowed to be tired." And even though the words are simple, the truth behind them is vast. They sit like that for a little while longer, wrapped not in passion but in permission, in the unspoken agreement that for this brief night, they can be two humans stripped of expectation. Eventually, he lets his head rest against the wall, eyes closing as the heaviness finally yields to weariness. She keeps watch, not as a guardian, not as a lover, but as someone who understands the sacredness of letting another person fall asleep without fear. When the lamp flickers again, you sense that the room has grown smaller, safer, like a cocoon woven from silence and shared understanding. Outside, the wind brushes softly across the stone like the closing of a chapter. And as you step back from the scene, letting it dim slowly in your mind, you realize something the ruins of Pompeii can never say aloud. The Lupanar was not built for sin. It was built for the weary, for the ones who needed a night, just one night, where the world asked nothing of them except to breathe. And in that ancient quiet, you feel your own breath steady, deepening with the soft reminder that tenderness, even in the unlikeliest places, has always been part of what keeps the human heart alive.
As you step back into the quiet night of ancient Rome, letting the Lupanar fade into a gentle shadow behind you, something softer begins to rise from the silence, an awareness, almost like a whisper carried by the wind, of the women whose footsteps never made it into the pages of history. They were here, moving through the same streets you're walking now, though they moved differently, quieter, smaller, as if the world had taught them early that taking up too much space was dangerous. These women were the invisible ones, slaves with calloused hands, entertainers whose smiles were rehearsed like performances, and those pushed into the profession not out of desire but out of survival. Their names are mostly lost, scattered like dust across centuries, but if you listen closely, the night still holds echoes of who they once were. Maybe one of them was named Livia, a girl sold at 14 because her father owed a debt he could never repay. Maybe she once dreamt of making perfumes from the wild herbs that grew on the hillside outside Pompeii, her hands stained with lavender and rosemary instead of ash and exhaustion. Or perhaps there was a woman called Syra, taken from the coast of Greece, her mother's lullabies still lingering in her memory even as she learned a language she did not choose in a city that did not belong to her. When the world looked at these women, it saw roles, never souls. It saw property, not people. But tonight, in the quiet sanctuary of your imagination, you see something different. You see the way they might have paused in front of a doorway before entering, gathering their courage even when it felt thin as thread. You see the way their shoulders tightened when a stranger spoke too loudly, the way they hid their fear behind a practiced tilt of the head. You see how every night they walked a line between survival and disappearance, too visible to ignore, too invisible to protect. Inside the small stone rooms, between the faded frescoes and the rough beds, these women carried an entire universe of secret dreams. The dreams were never grand. They were tender, fragile, like small lamps kept burning in the darkest corners of the heart. One woman might have longed for nothing more than a warm loaf of bread she could call her own. Another might have wished to sit by the river without being watched, just to breathe freely for one evening. And perhaps someone else, someone whose name dissolved long ago, might have wished for something as simple as being spoken to gently once by someone who saw her as a human being instead of a service. In the softness of night, the city seems to remember them. When a breeze slips through the alleyways, it carries their unspoken stories. When the moonlight brushes the stone walls, it caresses the places where their hands once rested. And when you walk with slow steps, letting your mind quiet, you might almost feel the warmth of their presence. Women who lived not as symbols or cautionary tales, but as breathing, hurting, hoping souls. The stones beneath your feet were their stones. The shadows that wrap around you once wrapped around them too. And though history reduced them to footnotes or erased them entirely, the night has not forgotten. If you listen closely to the rustle of leaves against a courtyard wall, to the soft hum of distant voices, to the silent places where no one stands anymore, you can almost hear the faintest whisper, not of tragedy, but of existence, a quiet, trembling truth. We were here. We mattered. Remember us. And in this moment, as the night settles deeper around you, you do.
As you walk farther into the quiet heart of the ancient city, the night around you feels heavier. Not oppressive, but thoughtful, as if it carries the weight of stories no one ever paused to hear. You begin to see these invisible women not as silhouettes drifting through history, but as individual lives that once glowed briefly, like lamps flickering in a long, dark corridor. Imagine one of them, a woman named Marcia, standing behind a tavern late at night, brushing dust from her skirt with small, careful motions. She is not rushing. She moves slowly because she is tired in the deep way that settles in your bones. Her day has been long, filled with demands from those who barely see her, And yet she stands here alone in a narrow alley, letting the night give her a moment that belongs only to her. The moonlight touches her cheek, and she closes her eyes, allowing herself to feel the coolness. No one would guess that her mind is somewhere else entirely, a small memory she keeps hidden, a sister she hasn't seen in years, the smell of the olive trees near her childhood home, the dream of owning a little stall in the market where she could sell woven ribbons dyed in colors she mixes herself. These dreams are humble but precious, folded carefully inside her heart like tiny letters from a past life she can no longer return to. A few streets away, another woman, Sabina, walks with a measured step, her sandals brushing lightly against the stone. She carries a clay jar to fetch water, though everyone knows the jar isn't the real reason she ventured out. She comes for the quiet, for the chance to feel, even briefly, like a woman walking simply because she wants to, not because she's being ordered. She pauses near a public fountain, tracing a fingertip along the edge of the stone. The water reflects the moon, shimmering in fragmented patterns that dance across her face. In that moment, she imagines herself somewhere else, maybe back on the small farm she grew up on, where nights were filled with the sound of cicadas and the warm voices of people she loved. That world feels impossibly far away, like a story told through layers of glass, but she holds it anyway, because it reminds her that she was someone before she was claimed by this city. You notice something as you walk. None of these women dream of extraordinary things. Their longings are tender and small. Rest, safety, a place where their names matter, the chance to stand without fear. And the night, in its gentle wisdom, makes space for these longings. Even the ruins that remain today seem to hold their presence. When the breeze moves through the tall grass growing between cracked stones, it sounds almost like their voices murmuring to one another. When the shadows slip across the walls, they mimic the movements of hands that once braided hair, wiped tears, or prepared bread in silence. These women were not powerful, yet the city depended on them. They cleaned its rooms, washed its clothes, served its meals, carried its secrets, bore its children, and absorbed its cruelties with a strength history refused to acknowledge. But in this quiet hour, you can sense that strength, the quiet, enduring kind that does not shout or demand recognition. It is the strength of someone who keeps living even when unseen. As you walk farther into the night, you realize you are not just remembering them, you are walking with them. Their shadows fall beside yours. The air around you feels warmer, as though dozens of invisible steps move in harmony with your own. And when you pause to listen, to truly listen, you might hear it, the sound of women who were never allowed to speak their truth while living, now whispering gently through time. Not sorrow, but remembrance. Not despair, but a plea soft enough to cradle you into sleep. See us, hear us, let us exist again, if only in your quiet thoughts tonight.
As you continue walking through the quiet dreamscape of ancient Rome, the night begins to feel like a vast, breathing tapestry woven from all the unspoken stories that once drifted through these streets. And somewhere within this tapestry, the presence of the women who lived in its shadows begins to gather around you more vividly, as if they sense that, for the first time in centuries, someone is truly listening. You pass beneath an archway, softened by time, its surface worn down by countless hands, some belonging to the powerful,
but many belonging to women who passed here unnoticed, their fingers brushing the stone as they moved quickly to avoid drawing attention. You can almost see them now, not as ghosts or silhouettes, but as flickers of memory given brief shape by the gentleness of the night. Here, under the muted glow of a moon half hidden by drifting clouds, you pause and feel the weight of their invisible footsteps settling beside yours. Perhaps one of them was named Tertia, a woman who once laughed loudly as a child before life taught her to quiet her voice. She might have come from a village far south of the city, brought to Rome in a dusty wagon when she was barely old enough to braid her own hair. She worked in a laundry house, scrubbing tunics in cold water that chapped her skin, humming songs no one else recognized. But at night, when she lay on her straw mattress and looked up at the ceiling, she dreamed of warm bread, gentle hands, and the freedom to choose where she walked. The dreams were small, but they kept her alive. Another woman, maybe called Helena, worked in a household as a servant. She lit lamps at dusk, tended the fire, swept marble floors until they gleamed. To the world, she was invisible, but in the quiet moments before dawn, she would sit by a window overlooking the courtyard and watch the first light touch the columns. She wondered if somewhere, someone else in the city was watching the same sunrise and wishing for tenderness just as she did. And then there were the women history labeled with cold, dismissive terms: prostitutes, concubines, slaves, women who carried the city's burdens in silence. Their suffering is easy to imagine, but the truth of their hearts is harder to see unless you let the night speak for them. If you listen now, really listen, you may hear something unexpected. Not bitterness, not sorrow, but a longing to be remembered as more than what the world forced them to be. Because even the smallest life holds entire universes, hopes, worries, memories, fears, moments of laughter that flickered and vanished. These women too loved. They worried. They whispered secrets to the river. They traced patterns in the dust with their toes. They sang quietly to themselves when no one was listening. And though history erased these moments, the night has kept them, tucked gently into the folds of time. As you stand still, the air seems to thicken with their presence. You feel something like a collective exhale, a release of stories held too long in silence. The breeze shifts, brushing against your cheek as lightly as a hand that once sought comfort in the dark. The shadows along the walls move softly, as though shaped by the gentle sway of someone's long-forgotten footsteps. And then, carried on a silence so deep it almost feels like water, you hear it, the faintest whisper woven from many voices. We were more than what they said we were. The words settle into you like warm sand, grounding you, inviting you to remember, to keep their existence alive, not through pity, but through the simple, profound act of acknowledging their humanity. In this stillness, your own breath slows down, your eyelids grow heavy, the world softens at the edges, and as you prepare to step forward into the next chapter of the night, you carry them with you, not as shadows, but as gentle companions walking quietly at your side, grateful to be heard at last.
As the last quiet whispers of Rome fade behind you, the night seems to stretch like a long silk ribbon pulled gently across the sea, carrying you eastward until the air itself changes. The scent becomes lighter here, saltier, touched with the sweetness of figs and the faintest hint of burning incense. And when you open your mind's eyes again, you are no longer in Rome at all. You are standing on the soft moonlit stones of ancient Piraeus, the bustling port of Athens now hushed under a luminous Aegean sky. The sea is breathing slowly, its waves brushing the docks with a soothing rhythm like the city's own heartbeat at rest. Lanterns along the ships flickered gently, painting trembling ribbons of gold across the dark water. Farther inland, Athens rises like a dream in marble, pillars glowing pale silver under the moon, the Parthenon perched in serene silence above it all, as if watching the night unfold with the calm patience of a goddess. Tonight is not a night of labor or survival. Tonight is a night of thought, desire, poetry, of minds and bodies dancing in slow, ancient harmony. You walk along a quiet street, leading toward the home of a wealthy patron, where a symposium is already beginning. The doorway opens to a courtyard fragrant with crushed mint and warm oil lamps. Low couches line the floor, draped with soft fabrics dyed in pomegranate red and sea blue. Musicians sit in a corner tuning their lyres, the gentle plucking of strings drifting through the air like droplets of sound. And among the guests, philosophers, poets, merchants, and wandering thinkers move the Hetairai. They are nothing like the women you left behind in Rome's shadows. In Athens, a hetera is not merely a companion of pleasure, but a companion of the mind. Educated, articulate, trained in music, poetry, and the delicate art of conversation. They step into the courtyard with quiet confidence, their gold bracelets chiming softly as they move. Their smiles are not forced. Their presence is not hidden. They are women who exist in a space rare for the ancient world, a place where their intelligence is not just tolerated, but sought after. One of them, perhaps named Thaleia, glides past you with a calm grace, the moonlight catching the copper thread woven into her hair. She carries a small cup of wine, swirling it thoughtfully before offering it to a guest who looks lost in contemplation. "The color tells a story," she says, her voice low and melodic, but only if you look beyond the surface. The guest laughs softly, revealing that they understand her words are not about the wine at all. Across the courtyard, another hetera sits beside a philosopher whose beard is white with years. They speak not of desire, but of the nature of longing itself, whether the hunger of the body is so different from the hunger of the mind. She quotes a line from Sappho, and the philosopher closes his eyes as if tasting the words. The atmosphere here is not wild or frenzied. It is slow, like honey poured in the dark.
Minds drift. Thoughts unfold. Conversations unfurl like silk ribbons twisting through the warm night air. Even desire feels different in this place, less urgent, more reflective, as though shaped by the moon rather than the heat of day. And as you stand at the edge of the gathering, watching the gentle glow of lamps flicker across painted walls, you begin to understand why the Greeks believed so deeply in the presence of gods. Nights like this do not feel entirely human. There is something divine in the stillness, something ancient in the way sound travels, soft, deliberate, touched by something greater than the people speaking. Here, pleasure and philosophy intertwine like vines around a column. Here, a whispered thought can feel as intimate as a caress, and under the soft Athenian moon, you feel yourself drawn into a different kind of night, one shaped not by survival, but by curiosity, beauty, and the timeless desire to be understood.
As the night deepens over ancient Athens, the Symposium unfolds like a slow blooming flower. Each petal, a new conversation, a new melody, a new glimmer of desire softened by thought. The courtyard has grown warmer now, filled with the mingling of laughter, lyre strings humming in gentle waves, and the low murmur of voices weaving ideas through the air like drifting smoke. You move quietly between the couches, watching how the wine glows ruby in the lamplight, how guests recline lazily on embroidered cushions, how each face seems more open, more unguarded, as the moon climbs higher above the marble columns. A servant pours wine into a kylix, but no one here drinks for the sake of forgetting. They drink to loosen thought, to let imagination slide closer to honesty. And as you listen, you realize that these gatherings were not simply places of indulgence. They were crucibles of the mind, where philosophy and pleasure were not enemies, but companions, sharing the same cup. Near the center of the courtyard sits a Hetairai named Dione, her posture relaxed, her eyes shimmering with a quiet alertness. A poet leans toward her, halfway through a passionate explanation of how longing shapes the rhythm of a verse. She listens with a small, amused smile, and when he pauses to breathe, she gently interrupts. Longing shapes everything, not just poems. The poet blinks, surprised, then entranced. Dione lifts her lyre and plucks a single string, just one, yet the sound vibrates like a pulse through the quiet. Desire, she continues, is simply a form of remembering what the soul once touched, even if the body never did. Around them, the air seems to grow thicker, softer, as though the night itself is leaning closer to hear. In another corner, a philosopher and a Hetairai engage in a debate about whether beauty resides in the object or in the eyes that behold it. Her voice is light, thoughtful. If a man finds beauty in a simple gesture, a hand brushing hair aside. Does the beauty live in the hand or in the heart that sees it? The philosopher strokes his beard, contemplating. Perhaps, he says, beauty is not a place at all, but a moment. She laughs softly, and the sound is like a chime struck by moonlight. Even the musicians pause, briefly captivated. This is what defines the nights of Greece, not the excess, not the intoxication, but the ease with which minds reveal themselves when the world grows quiet enough to let truth settle like silt in a still pool. You wander farther, noticing how intimacy in this place is woven not from touch, but from words, words that travel gently, intentionally, brushing against the skin like warm breeze. A Hetairai recites a fragment of Sappho, her voice low, contemplative. I simply wish to be. No one laughs, no one interrupts. For a moment, everyone breathes as one, because the words are not about seduction. They are about existence, longing, the fragile ache of being human. Wine cups are raised, but slowly, reverently. The fire crackles, the lyres hum. A young man, lying on a couch, gazes up at the stars, then turns to the woman beside him and whispers, "Do you think the gods envy us?" She smiles, brushing her fingers along the rim of her cup. "Maybe," she murmurs, "because we feel everything more intensely, even sorrow, even joy." Somewhere beyond the courtyard, a breeze moves through olive trees, stirring their silver leaves. The night smells of honey cakes cooling on distant windowsills, of sea air drifting in from the port, of warm skin and old stone. And as you close your eyes, absorbing the softness of it all, you understand how different this world is from Rome. Here, desire is not something to hide or spend, but something to explore, to ponder, to savor like poetry whispered in the dark. Tonight, Athens is not a city of history. It is a breathing soul, alive in every melody, every question, every longing spoken aloud under the watchful moon.
The symposium softens as the night leans toward its quietest hour, and Athens seems to exhale, long and slow, like a great creature finally settling into sleep. The conversations grow lower now, not because interest fades, but because the weight of the moonlight encourages gentler tones, deeper confessions, thoughts spoken only when the world feels safe enough to hear them. A cool breeze slips through the courtyard, carrying the scent of crushed olive leaves and the distant hush of the sea, and the lamps flicker in response, casting warm halos across the faces of the gathered guests. You can almost feel the shift inside the minds around you. Ideas, once sharp, now rounding into something softer. Ambitions, once burning, now dimming into a warm, glowing ember of contentment. A Hetairai named Murmurs sits by a pool of still water near the edge of the courtyard, her reflection wavering softly with every flutter of the flame. Beside her, a young thinker speaks of the ache of wanting to belong, to a person, to a calling, to a moment that feels like home. Myrine listens quietly, her fingers tracing idle patterns on the surface of the water. When he finishes, she smiles, not a smile of amusement, but one of recognition. Longing, she says softly, is the proof that we are alive. Even when it hurts, it means the soul is still reaching for something. The young man nods slowly, letting the words sink into him like warm oil. Behind them, music resumes, a softer melody now, barely more than a whisper of notes drifting into the air. A lyre, a small flute, maybe a voice humming from somewhere unseen. The sound wraps around the courtyard like a shawl laid gently across tired shoulders. For a moment, it feels as if the gods themselves are listening, leaning their immortal ears toward the fragile, temporary beings below, curious about the strange beauty of mortal longing. You walk deeper into the house, where another small room glows with the light of oil lamps arranged in a slow circle. Several Hetairai sit with a group of older scholars who are discussing not politics, not wars, not wealth, but the human heart. One scholar admits he has spent his entire life chasing applause, yet still feels unseen. A Hetairai answers him with a simple truth. Recognition is a shadow. We can never hold it. Better to seek moments that stay inside you. The room falls silent, not heavy, but thoughtful, as if everyone is quietly turning that sentence over in their minds, comparing it to their own lives. Perhaps this is what gives Greek nights their softness, the way wisdom slips into the air, not through lectures or grand speeches, but through small, tender exchanges spoken between sips of wine and shared glances. You return to the central courtyard and find the guests reclining more deeply now, some drifting into half-sleep, others murmuring quiet thoughts about myths and memories. A Hetairai recites a gentle tale about Selene, the moon goddess, who fell in love with a mortal shepherd and kissed him into eternal slumber because dreams were the only way they could meet. The story drifts through the courtyard like a feather on a slow current, touching each listener with its quiet sadness. One poet exhales and whispers, "Perhaps love is strongest when it asks for nothing." A soft murmur of agreement ripples around the space. The lamps dim, the music softens, the breeze grows cooler, and Athens lies under its moon like a city wrapped in silk. You watch as the last conversations fade into contemplative silence, replaced by the gentle rhythm of slow breathing, rustling fabrics, and the faint resonance of the sea beyond the walls. This is not the roaring night of Rome. This is a night of introspection, tenderness, and the delicate acknowledgement of everything human beings desire but rarely confess. Under this serene Aegean sky, you understand why the Greeks carved gods into marble, not to worship perfection, but to hold on to the beauty of yearning, of reaching, thinking, longing, loving, even when the world changes around them. And as your eyes grow heavier,
The symposium recedes like a tide, leaving behind only the echo of music, the warmth of shared thoughts, and the gentle touch of moonlight resting against your skin. Tonight, Athens holds you the way a story does, softly, completely, without expecting anything in return.
As the echoes of Greek music fade into a gentle hush, the night shifts once more, drawing you into a quieter, more contemplative corner of the ancient world, a place where pleasure, power, and policy blurred together beneath the lamps of Rome and Greece. Here, beneath the glow of oil light and the murmur of distant footsteps, the hidden machinery of the night begins to reveal itself. It is not loud, it is not cruel, it is steady, like the turning of a millstone no one notices until they listen closely enough. You begin to see that every sinful night had a structure beneath it, a framework of rules woven by cities that understood human longing deeply enough to regulate it. In Rome, this framework stretched like an invisible net across the city. The state did not shame the existence of lupanars or taverns or dimly lit alleys. Instead, it governed them, quietly, deliberately. Taxes were collected from brothels the way taxes were collected from bakeries. Licenses were issued. Owners registered their establishments. The locations were chosen carefully, pushed into certain districts where noise and desire could swirl together without disturbing the more polished avenues of senators and high-born matrons. Even the signs carved above doorways, simple phallic symbols pointing the way, were placed with the approval of magistrates who pretended not to notice but counted every coin. And yet, while rules existed, enforcement was gentle, almost sleepy, as if the night economy breathed on its own, too ancient and too necessary to be handled with a heavy hand. In Greece, the system felt different, not softer but more philosophical in its own way. Certain districts of Athens and Corinth became known for their pleasures not because the state encouraged them, but because the state quietly allowed them to grow. Hetairai paid their dues, landlords collected their rent, and the city benefited from the silver that trickled in. Everything flowed, like water running through channels cut long ago. Yet beneath the calm of regulation shimmered something more complicated, the line between privilege and survival. A wealthy Roman patrician slipping into a lupanar could leave whenever he wished, wrapped in his status like a cloak. A poor laborer, exhausted from the day's heat, might come seeking a brief moment of warmth or companionship he could barely afford. The same rules governed both men, but the night held them differently. And for the women working behind those doors, the difference felt even sharper. A high-class Hetairai of Greece might dine with philosophers, debate poetry, and earn enough silver to choose her clients, or reject them entirely. Meanwhile, a woman in a Roman brothel, registered like livestock, could barely dream of such autonomy. Yet when the lamps dimmed and the city quieted, all of them lived under the same moon, caught in the same web of law, coin, and expectation.
You sense the contradiction, but it arrives like a soft tide rather than a shock, because the ancient world, for all its harshness, understood something about human nature that still rests within us. Desire, loneliness, curiosity, distraction. They were not problems to be crushed, but currents to be guided. And so the cities built their systems, imperfect but functional, to keep those currents from flooding the streets. The night economy fed families, it funded temples, it shaped neighborhoods, and even though the state claimed to regulate it for moral order, everyone knew it survived because it served the needs of the powerful as much as the poor. Nothing was equal, nothing was fair, but everything moved with a slow, rhythmic sense of inevitability, like a wheel turning in sand. As you stand in this quiet place between Rome and Greece, you begin to feel the truth settle around you. Behind every pleasure district, every whispered desire, every lamp-lit encounter, there was an entire world of rules, silver, and silent compromises. Not dark enough to frighten, not bright enough to comfort, just there, steady, ancient, and utterly human.
As you walk deeper into the quiet labyrinth of ancient streets, half Roman, half Greek, the night begins to reveal more of its hidden architecture, and you start to sense how much of these sinful worlds depended not on desire alone, but on systems designed by hands far removed from the shadows. The city's officials, always watching, always calculating, understood something uncomplicated yet profound. Where people gathered, coin gathered too. And so taxes on brothels, taverns, and pleasure houses flowed into Rome's aerarium and Athens' public funds like slow, steady rivers. The money built roads, fed soldiers, lit public baths, repaired temples. It was strangely ironic. The same empire that boasted of discipline and virtue quietly relied on the earnings of its most hidden corners. Nothing about that irony surprised the people of the night. They lived with it as naturally as breathing. But for a traveler like you, drifting through these lamp-lit corridors, the quiet truth settles over you like a soft weight. So many public monuments gleamed because private desires were taxed. And yet behind the coins, behind the census rolls, and the stamped tablets recording payments lay another truth. The night was not equal. Rome's elite could walk into a pleasure district wearing a cloak that guaranteed safety. Their names carried weight. No guard would touch them. No tax collector would overcharge them. Even the women working inside would dare not refuse them. For a senator's son or a wealthy merchant, these nights were choices, temporary indulgences in a life full of options. But for those lower on the ladder, the night was not an escape. It was a fragile balance between survival and vulnerability. A simple laborer in Rome might save for weeks just to afford a single visit. He walked carefully because patrols treated him with suspicion. Even the cost of entry differed. Brothels raised their prices when wealthy clients flooded in, leaving the poor standing outside under the cold moonlight with their loneliness. And then there were the ones who worked behind the doors, the women whose names rarely entered the scrolls of history except as numbers. Some were slaves, some were freed women forced back into the trade by debt. All were part of a system that viewed them less as people and more as economic units, pieces in the city's machinery. They paid taxes too, sometimes directly, sometimes through the brothel owner. Their bodies were counted, assessed, regulated. And yet even here, in the dim corners of the night, there were hierarchies. A high-class courtesan in Greece could earn in a single evening what a Roman brothel slave made in a month. She could host philosophers, be invited to symposiums, exchange ideas that stirred the minds of men who shaped cities. She had choices. But for the women in Rome's cramped Lupanars, choices were luxuries they rarely tasted. Still, the night did not judge them. The moon cast its silver light on everyone equally, the poor man waiting outside, the wealthy patrician leaving in silence, the woman lighting a second lamp to prepare for another stranger. Even the stones seemed to carry their stories, warmed by countless footsteps, yet never giving away secrets. And as you continue walking, you feel the blurry line between privilege and struggle, between desire and duty, between what the city regulated and what it quietly ignored. Laws existed, but they flowed around people differently. Money existed, but it changed destinies unevenly. And somewhere between those two forces, law and silver, lies the most human truth of all. People come to the night seeking something they cannot ask for in the daylight. A touch, a moment, a distraction from worry, or just the feeling of not being alone in a world too large. The cities knew this. They built their rules around it. They profited from it. But they never solved it, because loneliness cannot be taxed and longing cannot be regulated. They lived in the spaces between the laws, soft, ancient, persistent, as much a part of Roman and Greek nights as the lamps flickering on the stone walls.
The deeper you wander into the quiet arteries of the ancient city, the more the night reveals a truth that feels both simple and impossibly heavy. Everything, desire, safety, survival, privilege, was shaped not only by human impulse, but by the quiet hand of wealth. And now, in this final stretch of the chapter, the night invites you to slow down, to listen, to feel the way silver moved through Rome and Greece like a second bloodstream, sustaining some lives, draining others. You pause beneath a balcony where the lantern burns low, a thin thread of smoke rising like a tired sigh. Below it, the street divides into two narrow paths. One leads toward the bustling districts, still echoing with soft laughter and distant flutes. The other leads to darker places, where broken tiles crunch underfoot, and the air carries the faint metallic smell of old water and old worries. You follow neither path fully. Instead,
You linger in the middle where the night feels most honest. From here, you can sense the entire ecosystem of the ancient evening, the way taxes, fees, bribes, and whispered agreements shaped the rhythm of every encounter. A wealthy Roman man might slip a coin to a guard to walk freely without question, while a poor man might be stopped, searched, scolded for lingering too long in the wrong alley. A Greek merchant could pay extra for discretion, for silence, for a moment that would never reach his household. Meanwhile, a woman working behind a dim doorway might hand over nearly half her earnings to the house owner before keeping a few small coins for herself. And though no official scroll proclaimed it, everyone understood. The night had its own currency beyond silver. Fear, hope, reputation, the fragile bargaining power of someone with nothing left. Yet despite all the inequity, the rules of the night never felt as sharp as the rules of the day. In daylight, Rome and Greece were empires of hierarchy, of harsh judgments, of public virtue and polished masks. But at night, those masks loosened. The senator sat beside the fisherman in the same tavern. The philosopher drank from the same cup as the sailor. The courtesan shared poetry with men who could rewrite laws at dawn. Everyone was softened by the darkness, equalized not in status but in vulnerability. And in that shared vulnerability, the cities found a strange balance. Even the laws reflected it. Some regions taxed brothels heavily to fill the city coffers. Others taxed them lightly to keep them open. Certain districts were designated for pleasure because moving them elsewhere would disrupt the unspoken agreements that kept the city functioning smoothly. Nothing was written in stone, but everything was understood. The night provided something the city needed. Not just distraction, not just pleasure, but release. An escape valve for the pressures of a life lived under constant expectation. You walk past a closed doorway, a wooden panel, a simple latch, a faint scent of smoke inside. Perhaps earlier tonight, someone sat behind that door weeping quietly after earning far less than she hoped. Perhaps a man stumbled in seeking to forget his troubles and discovered that forgetting cost more than he expected. Perhaps a wealthy merchant whispered secrets he would deny in daylight. None of their stories appear in history books. They exist only in the silence that now fills this empty street, settling like dust on the stones. A stray cat appears, weaving between your footsteps with a soft purr, as though it knows these streets better than any lawmaker. It pauses beside a small, discarded coin, sniffs it, then walks on, reminding you that value is something humans assign, not something the night itself cares about. And finally, as you near the edge of the district, you look back. Oil lamps dim, voices fade, a single door closes with a tired creak, and the city exhales again, as though relieved to rest from its own contradictions. In this stillness, you understand the final truth of the chapter. The ancient night was not sinful by nature. It was practical, human, a reflection of needs no law could ever erase and no coin could ever fully satisfy.
And though centuries have passed, that quiet truth remains unchanged. Every city has a nighttime economy, built not from vice, but from the simple, delicate ache of being human in a world too large to face alone.
The night follows you gently as you leave behind the silent systems of law and coin, leading you into a narrower path where history breathes differently, softer, more intimate, like a whisper pressed against the back of your mind. The air cools as you step into the shadowed ruins of Pompeii, long after the bustling day crowds have vanished, leaving only the moon, the stillness, and the faint echo of lives frozen in time. Here, the streets feel smaller, almost shy. The stones beneath your feet are cold and uneven, worn smooth by thousands of footsteps that belonged to people whose names never reached the records of senators or poets, but whose desires, jokes, frustrations, and longings found their way onto the walls. You walk slowly, letting your fingers brush against the rough volcanic stone, and the moment your skin touches it, something shifts. The city, though long buried and reborn from ash, begins to murmur. Graffiti, faint, scratched, playful, bitter, starts revealing itself like fragments of dreams coming back after centuries of silence. One inscription, carved with casual confidence, reads, "I was here and I had fun." It is childish in a way, and yet profoundly human, proof that even 2,000 years ago, someone felt the need to be seen, even if only by a stranger reading their carved laughter in the dark. Another message, etched near the entrance of a tavern, whispers, "Don't trust lovers. They leave you colder than winter." The spite in it is quiet now, softened by time, but you can almost imagine the person who wrote it, leaning against the wall, heart bruised, carving their disappointment so the stone would carry what the night could not heal. Farther down the alley, a simple drawing catches the moonlight, a rough sketch of a face with a mischievous smile, the kind someone might draw today on a bathroom stall. You smile without meaning to. The realization slips into you effortlessly. Nothing about human nature has changed. The words may fade, the stones may crumble, but the emotions scratching beneath them, desire, jealousy, humor, loneliness, remain exactly the same. You walk deeper, letting the silence settle around you, and with every step, the city grows more intimate. It feels as though every scratched sentence, every etched figure is reaching out from across time, asking to be remembered, to be understood. A faint line written by a woman reads, "If you look for me, I am more than what you see." You pause there, your hand still lingering on the wall. Across millennia, she speaks with a clarity that feels startling. Her voice, though quiet, carries the weight of someone who wanted the world to know she existed beyond the labels others forced upon her. And in the stillness,
you realize how many people passed through these streets carrying unsaid stories. Lovers who laughed too loudly, workers who dreamed of better days, women who hoped someone, anyone, would see them as more than what their role demanded. The moon hangs low, silver and heavy, as though listening to these remnants with you. The breeze moves lightly through the empty houses, nudging the dust as if brushing ancient thoughts awake. Pompeii is quiet, but it is not silent. It is full of breath, half memories, half imagination, woven together by the hands that carved their truths into stone. As your footsteps continue, you feel strangely comforted. These voices, though faint and broken, remind you of something simple and beautiful. Every mistake, every longing, every attempt to be seen and understood is older than any empire. What you feel now has been felt by countless others, and though time moves relentlessly, the walls never forget.
As you continue wandering through the quiet stone corridors of Pompeii, the silence feels almost deliberate, as though the city itself has stepped aside to let its memories speak. The deeper you walk, the more you sense that the graffiti on these walls is not merely writing. It is a pulse, a heartbeat frozen in ash, a whisper trapped in plaster. One message catches your eye, carved faintly into the wall of a once busy tavern. I was not here alone. The handwriting is rushed, uneven, as if the writer feared being caught or hoped to be remembered. You pause, letting your fingers hover just above the letters, imagining someone centuries ago leaning close to the same wall, scratching out a confession that was not meant for judges or historians, but for the night itself. Farther along, another inscription appears beneath a fading painted figure. "Fortunata, you are my joy." The words feel soft, despite being scratched into stone, and for a brief moment the lonely streets of Pompeii warm with the memory of someone who once loved fiercely, foolishly, honestly. You picture the writer, maybe a young man smelling faintly of wine and dust, hesitating before carving her name, hoping she might someday pass by, run her fingers over the letters, and feel the warmth he left there. These walls have seen gestures like that more times than any record will ever admit. Around another corner, a cruder message appears, the kind that carries both humor and bitterness. "Don't trust lovers at dawn." You smile a little at the thought of someone perhaps hurt or disappointed, leaving a warning for strangers they would never meet. Even pain has a voice here, and it lingers in the stones long after its owner has disappeared. The street narrows, guiding you into a lane where the air feels cooler. Here, the graffiti becomes sharper, more personal. Some inscriptions are simple tallies of visits, numbers scratched like quiet boasts. Others complain about unfair prices or brag about fleeting triumphs. And one, written with a steadier hand than most, simply says, "We are all shadows." You stand still, letting that settle inside you, because there on a wall older than many nations, someone distilled what it means to be human, how small we feel at night, how brief our footprints seem when we imagine the world without us, and yet those same shadows left marks that survived the fire, the ash, the centuries. You touch the wall gently, feeling its coolness travel into your palm.
The stone does not tell you the names of the writers. It does not reveal whether their nights were joyful or sorrowful, whether they carved these lines in loneliness or laughter. But it does tell you something else, something quieter and deeper. People have always used walls to speak the words they could not say aloud. In the dim light of the oil lamps centuries ago, someone carved their hope, their pettiness, their longing. Tonight, walking through these silent corridors, you become the listener they never expected to have. It is easy to imagine them now, leaning close to the stone, heart beating fast, whispering a secret into the night because there was no one else to hear it. Maybe they thought the words would vanish by morning. Maybe they hoped they would. But the volcano preserved what time would have erased, turning private feelings into eternal echoes. As you keep walking, the realization follows you like a soft footstep. Thousands of years may pass, but human hearts do not change. We still love badly, hope desperately, fear foolishly, laugh freely. We still reach for connection when the night feels too large. And in a strange, tender way, the people of Pompeii, through these carved whispers, reach back toward you.
The alley narrows as you continue walking, and the silence deepens until it feels almost sacred. The air cools. The moonlight settles into soft pools along the stone path, and each step you take echoes gently, as if the city is listening. Pompeii is no longer a ruin. In this moment, under this quiet sky, it becomes something else entirely, a memory wearing the shape of a city. You run your fingertips slowly along the wall beside you. The stone is cold at first, then warmer, where countless hands once touched it long before the ash froze everything in place. The grooves and scratches beneath your skin are not random. They are voices, thousands of them, pressed into the walls by people who never imagined their whispers would survive longer than their own names. A faint inscription catches your attention, carved so lightly, it's almost a sigh. It reads, "Don't forget me." No name, no context, just a plea suspended in time, as fragile now as the night it was carved into the stone. You pause, you breathe, and you realize you felt the same thing before, somewhere in your own life. A little farther down the alley, another piece of graffiti curls upward like a faded smile. Love is a brief madness. Enjoy it while it burns. You imagine the person who wrote it, sitting under a lamp, the smell of wine still on their breath, scratching the sentence into the wall because the feeling inside them was too big to keep. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe it wasn't. But tonight, in this stillness, it feels like a confession. The next wall bears something different, a rough drawing of two figures holding hands, one tall, one small, almost childlike. It tells no story, yet tells everything. You sense love there, or longing, or perhaps simply the need to say, "We were here." And in the soft glow of the moon, it strikes you that every human who ever lived has tried in one way or another to leave that same message behind. Further along the alley opens into a tiny courtyard that still holds its shape despite the centuries. A broken fountain sits at the center, its stone basin filled only with silence now.
but etched onto its rim is a single sentence, uneven and hurried. "I waited, but you did not come." The words stay with you, lingering like a shadow just behind your heartbeat. Someone felt disappointment here. Quiet, private, the kind that curls up inside the ribs and waits for morning. And the strange thing is, that disappointment feels familiar too. There is a universal ache hidden in these walls, one that folds you gently into its history. As you stand beneath the open sky, the wind shifts, moving through the city like a soft breath. The walls around you seem to exhale their secrets, the jokes, the heartbreaks, the warnings, the small flashes of joy. None of them monumental, none of them epic, all of them human. One final inscription catches your eye just before you leave the courtyard. It's carved higher up, as if the writer stood on tiptoe to make sure it would be seen. We live, we love, we break, and still the sun rises. It is the simplest of truths and the oldest. And in this quiet place, with the moon resting on shattered rooftops and the night folding softly around you, the words feel like a hand on your shoulder. People have always been the same: tender, foolish, hopeful, lonely. Whether in a lavish Roman villa or a tiny Pompeian alley, they sought warmth, meaning, laughter, escape. They carved their stories into walls because they didn't want their hearts to disappear without a trace. And now, 2,000 years later, you are touching those same stories, feeling their breath, hearing their whispers. And as your eyes grow heavier, you realize something beautiful. Time may erase cities, but it never truly erases the human soul. It lingers in stone, in words, in the soft spaces between memory and imagination. And tonight, walking through these sleeping ruins, you are not alone. You are surrounded by every whisper the walls have ever held.
The night is no longer young. It has softened, stretched, breathed, and lived with you, guiding you through Rome's dim corridors and Greece's moonlit courtyards. Now, as the ancient world grows quieter, you find yourself standing at the threshold of its final hours, a moment when even the most restless cities surrender to stillness. Ahead of you lies a Roman tavern, whose laughter once spilled into the street like warm wine. But now, its door is half closed, swaying gently with the weight of a night nearly spent. Inside, a single lamp flickers, illuminating empty cups, scattered olive pits, and the soft imprint of people who left only moments ago. You can almost hear the echoes of their voices, fading jokes, whispered confessions, and laughter tinged with exhaustion. Yet even those echoes are stepping back now, slipping into the deeper darkness where memory begins its slow work of turning moments into stories. You move on, letting your hand brush against the cool stone wall as you step into a narrower alley. Earlier, this alley was a river of footsteps. Workers, wanderers, lovers, and strangers crossing paths for reasons they themselves barely understood. But now,
It is empty, except for the faint sigh of the night wind. The stones under your feet feel smoother, as if thousands of years of footsteps have polished them into something almost gentle. A cat slips quietly across your path, its silhouette blending with the shadow of an old archway. Even it seems ready to sleep. Farther ahead, the lanterns of a Lupanar glow with fading light. A woman inside dims the last lamp, her movements slow, deliberate, as though understanding that the night has taken enough from her. She wraps a shawl around her shoulders, leans against the doorway for a brief moment, and lets out a sigh, long, weary, but not sad. More like someone finally laying down a burden she has carried for hours. As she closes the door, the light disappears, leaving only a thin line of gold before even that fades into the stone. You continue walking, feeling the city folding in on itself, one quiet breath at a time. Across the sea, in Greece, the symposium you visited earlier has settled into silence. The lyres have stopped. The philosophers have drifted into sleep or into soft musings that no longer rise above a murmur. Even the Hetairai, so graceful under the lantern glow, now gather their shawls and step out into the cool air, their footsteps light, unhurried, softened by the weightlessness that comes when the work of the night is finally done. The moon hangs low, tired too, as if it has watched enough longing, laughter, and secrets for one evening. And as you walk through these quieting streets, half Roman, half Greek, you feel the ancient world gently retreating, closing its windows, lowering its lamps, whispering to itself that it has done enough for tonight. Your breath begins to slow to match the rhythm around you. The stones seem cooler beneath your feet. Even your thoughts come more softly now, as though padded with the same silence that cradles the sleeping city. In this tender stillness, it becomes clear that every night, no matter how loud or sinful or storied, eventually leads to rest. Even the cities that shaped empires must sleep. Even the people who filled their nights with longing must set it all down for a while. And as you take another gentle step forward, the ancient world seems to murmur. You too can rest now. You have walked far enough. The night will hold you.
As you walk farther into the heart of the ancient city, the night begins to loosen its hold, not abruptly, but with the quiet gentleness of a curtain slowly falling. The laughter from the tavern fades behind you until it becomes only a faint echo, like a memory slipping back into its shell. The lamps along the street burn lower now, their flames shrinking into soft points of gold that tremble each time the wind brushes past. You move down a narrow alley, the same alley that hours ago hummed with hurried footsteps, whispered invitations, and the warmth of bodies passing close in the dimness. Now it feels deeper, emptier,
as if the stones themselves are preparing to sleep. A man sweeps the doorway of a wine shop, his movements slow, unhurried, guided by habit rather than thought. Another lantern above him sputters, then steadies, casting a thin glow across the jars and amphorae resting in the shadows. This is the hour when the workers of the night return to themselves, peeling away the roles they carried for strangers. A woman sitting on a low step removes a bracelet from her wrist, rubbing the mark it left on her skin. A flute player packs his instrument into a cloth, brushing away the faint traces of wine spilled during a lively song. They do not speak loudly. They barely speak at all. The night has taken its share of energy, and now it asks for silence. You pass the entrance of a Lupanar, its doorway half closed, its painted frescoes dimmed by the lack of torchlight. Earlier, voices filled its rooms, soft laughter, hushed negotiations, whispered comfort. Now you hear only the soft murmuring of someone folding linens inside, preparing the space for another day that will come far too soon. The people inside are neither mysterious nor sinful now. They are simply tired, simply human, stepping out of their roles and returning to the quiet center of themselves. The air cools as the breeze shifts from the warm heart of the city toward the open fields beyond. Somewhere, a rooster stirs too early, giving a single confused cry into the darkness. The sound makes you smile. Even here, even now, life never unfolds perfectly. And as you continue walking, you notice how the night's last moments feel softer, almost sacred. There is something calming about being awake while the rest of the city drifts toward sleep. You feel like a quiet guardian wandering through an ancient dream. The sky begins to change only slightly. A faint paling at the horizon, like diluted ink on parchment. The moon is lower now, brushing its last silver glow across rooftops and abandoned stalls. The shadows it casts seem longer, more thoughtful, as if they too are preparing to lie down and rest. You step onto a wider street, leading toward the city gate. The stones here are cool under your feet, carrying the memory of countless travelers who walked this path before you. Soldiers returning late from watch duty, merchants carrying torches, lovers slipping away from prying eyes, and now you, moving quietly through a city that has long forgotten your name, but somehow remembers your presence. You pause beside a column where the stone has been worn smooth by centuries of hands. You rest your fingers there, feeling the coolness sink into your skin. It's strange, you think, how even in the fading of a night there are moments that feel eternal. Moments when time stretches thin and lets you breathe more gently. This is one of them. The city exhaling, the shadows softening, the streets settling back into their ancient rhythm. And somewhere deep inside you, something settles too. You are no longer walking through Rome or Greece. You are floating, carried by the last quiet tide of a night that has seen everything humans are capable of: desire, sorrow, curiosity, laughter, and holds all of it with tenderness rather than judgment. Soon even this gentle tide will fade, but for now you walk through the final hush of a city preparing to sleep, and it feels as though the whole world is exhaling with you.
And so, as the last lantern flickers against the quiet stone, the ancient night settles into a peace it has known for thousands of years. A peace you now share, as though you've walked these streets not as a visitor from the future, but as someone the city itself has been waiting to guide home. The tavern doors creak shut behind you with a gentle finality. Not a harsh dismissal, but the soft closing of a book whose final words linger long after reading. You step into the open air of the sleeping quarter, and the wind feels different now. Colder, softer, like a whispered reminder that even the liveliest nights must eventually surrender to stillness. Across the road, the brothel where voices once rose and fell in muffled laughter is now silent, its doorway empty except for a lone oil lamp burning low, its flame shrinking into a thin amber thread. It breathes its last light quietly, as if bowing to the night itself. The alley beside it, once alive with footsteps and hurried whispers, now stretches before you like a ribbon of shadow. You walk slowly, your hand brushing the rough stone wall, feeling the faint warmth left behind by lives and stories that burned brightly only hours ago. Every step carries a softness, a sense that the world is not ending, but simply folding itself inward, like a tired creature drawing its limbs closer before sleep. Above you, the moon has shifted, leaning toward the western hills, her silver glow thinning as though she too is growing sleepy. The city responds, rooftops darken, windows close, and the last murmurs of distant conversations fade into the slow rhythm of breathing houses. You pause at a quiet crossroads where Rome and Greece seem to overlap in memory. The ghost of a Symposium's laughter mingling with the fading echoes of Pompeii's graffiti. Here, in this space that belongs to no single city, you feel the journey you've taken settling into your chest like a warm stone. The music, the secrets, the hierarchy, the longing, the humor, the tenderness, the contradictions that made these nights both sinful and profoundly human. You realize, gently, that everything you witnessed tonight, the whispered desires, the small mistakes, the fleeting joys, the quiet ache of loneliness, has never truly changed. Humans still reach for warmth. They still search for meaning. They still hope not to be invisible. Those ancient streets were simply mirrors of the same feelings that drift through your own life, night after night, when the world grows quiet. And now, as the last sounds dissolve into silence, you feel the city urging you toward rest, not with command, but with a soft, steady invitation. You walk toward the edge of the district, where the lanterns grow fewer and the earth smells faintly of dust
and cool stone. The road widens, giving space for your breath to deepen. Even the air seems to slow its movement around you. Somewhere behind you, a door latches for the final time. Somewhere ahead, a dog settles into sleep. Somewhere far off, the sea lifts and falls in a rhythm older than civilization. Everything is growing still. Everything is ready. And so are you. Let the night cradle you now, the way it cradled those who lived long before your time. You are safe here. You are seen. You have walked through history, and history has recognized you, welcomed you, and now gently releases you into rest. Close your eyes. Let the ancient world fade like a dream returning to its source. Let your breath grow slow. Let sleep come softly, like the last lamp going dark in a city that has finally, peacefully drifted into slumber.